Wings here. No pounding the pulpit of ego-driven my way or the highway attitudes. But there are no free passes given either. Answers to questions are important, but equally important is the reasons and methods used to find the answer. The lack of contradiction is the final judge here on Feet to the Fire. Feet. Sunday evenings. To the... How do you listen? Fire. Check out feettothefireradio.com. Now broadcasting live with archives kept in HD video on our YouTube channel and with high-quality audio only at Spreaker.com. The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium. We are back and we are live, Feet to the Fire. I'm your host, James Afayanchek, the Black Knight Talk Radio. Here we are live. November 12th, 2017. Gosh, time is really flying. I don't know if it's the older you get, the faster it goes, or if it's just going fast anyway. So, here we go. Tonight we have an interview with Lionel Parkinson. He's been on the show several times. His main, and first time he was on the show, his main thing was his book, very breakthrough book. I recommend it to anybody who is a Christian or, for that matter, isn't. Holy Virus. And it basically traces the contamination or of the Bible by Babylonian theology. So it's fascinating. But he has been on actually more for his commentary on the various economic discussions of what to do with your money in a crash and all that. How do you keep it in some of the traditional methods, gold and silver, etc., he has found problems with and been here to share this information. And that the sharing of this information, it's funny, it's been... kind of controversial in that it goes against the grain, and people are like, well, wait a minute. All these experts are saying this. This guy comes on here who's not a financial expert telling this stuff, and he is, but he is, let's call it, he is trained. He is a financial expert in his own right, in that his own personal experience, or with his own money, has been very successful. So he comes on to share. I'm playing with knobs here. Things have changed again. That magical imp that comes in here and changes my knobs each time. He shares this information and why and so forth. And there's been several videos. If you look down underneath in the description, you'll find the other videos that he's done on various topics. But today he's going to talk about kind of a big roundup and the mechanism and why he's saying what he says, in a more kind of in like a summary fashion, but also pointing to actual other people who are saying these things and other information. So it's not like he's just sitting there thinking this, making this up, or it's his own weird way of looking at things, but this is actually based on very solid evidence, both historical, legal, and in forecasting what he says, it's pretty reasonable. So nothing's in stone. Massive reverb going on. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to figure out what that is because I don't hear any reverb. Let me see. I don't know. I'll turn off the monitors. And I don't know, are you listening on the audio only? or are you listening on the YouTube? Because there shouldn't be any. Hate to disrupt this flow here, but I have to find out what the deal is. So let me know if anybody else has got any sound issues. I'll leave the headphones on for a little while, and then I'll get back to that. So the interview took place earlier today. Lionel doesn't have a computer, doesn't have the internet. And he uses a phone. Now, he's gone to YouTube. All right, I can actually check that out. YouTube. Oh, let's see. I'm going to have to do this. Let me go to Facebook and click on my own link. Let me click on my own link here and listen. Sorry about this, but this is what happens when you are your one-man operation here. Here we go. Going to hear this. There's none. Click on my own link. All right, so it's apparently something local to the listener. Others are chiming in. Okay. Well, anyway, I do like the headphones. But I understand with the video, it's a different thing. So anyway, we recorded this earlier today because the way it works out with his system, and but I do have plenty of graphics to go along there. There's a lot of links that will be shown that you can read with the HD, especially, but the links will be available as well. So that you can check on your own. And it's very important. I tell you, this is a very important show because for like $13, you can buy insurance that could yield you $100,000, for example, in a crash. That is not tied to banks, but it can't be confiscated. And he'll talk about that whole thing already. So it's really, 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 such a no-brainer. I have followed his advice. I'm thankful I did. That these basically you're shorting the markets. So if they crash, of course, shorting goes up. People should watch the movie The Big Short. It's a very well done movie. It's entertaining in its own self, but it's also very accurate to what happened with the collapse in the real estate market. And people who sold short at that point made a fortune. And they laughed at him for selling short because it never happened before. Well, these things have happened before. And Lionel's come up with a bunch of stuff the way you can do this. He makes no profit on this. He makes he's doing this just trying to help people. And God bless him for that. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things prior to us going to the interview. I'm going to see if I can go to this. Got to change the little window here. It's not the greatest window. It's a little off. Let me redo this capture. Bear with me here. Add screen capture. We're going to go like this. Boom. And we will bring this up there. Make sure that this is okay. This is it's called Pizzagate Uncompromised on Facebook, if you'd like to find it. It's, pretty much says it all. It talks about the pedophilia networks and whatnot. It's pretty discreet, it's pretty no holds barred. But, and I'm not picking on them. I joined the group and I listened to the group, but this is just typical of what's going on in the internet. It's really bothering me. Give an example. What if China, now these are quoting from, these posts are based on things happening at 4chan, QA Anonymous, POL, Q Clearance Anonymous, and all that. These people have been posting about stuff going on, and it's becoming, it's like an epidemic. Okay, so the guy said he was listening to it twice. He had 2 tabs open. Okay. That's all right. It's good. I want to make sure, because I've recorded whole shows with audio problems. And I didn't know about it. And so I'm glad that it was a local issue. So they're posting things like What if China, Russia, and others coordinating with the president to eliminate the New World Order? Something strange is happening. They're talking about, in particular, there's somebody has counted 100+ sealed indictments, and that these particular indictments are actually what's happening is Mueller, for whatever reason, that he got caught with uranium one, and in a plea bargaining, so to speak, he agreed to go after everybody in the who's involved in this stuff, so that Podesta, Clintons, they're all being ready to be arrested. These sealed indictments are all from the crooks who've been in the Clinton cartel and whatnot. And this is what's going on. It's this week, actually, starting this week. This is supposed to come down, according to what people are saying. And they're basically saying, I don't know, look at all these coincidences. Where's Podesta? We haven't heard Podesta. What about Hillary? Of course, Podesta just tweeted out blasting the president, as well as Hillary. So, I mean, they're around. They're just not, like, standing front and center. But this stuff is kind of put together in a loose form and creates a solid form. And it's worrisome because cognitive dissonance is a condition, when we've heard this mentioned a lot, is a condition where if you believe a certain thing and you base your sanity, your reality, whether it be finances or your health, whatever, you base on this information, and the reality is actually different. When it collides with reality, depending upon how off you are, the results could be devastating emotionally. And we can see what happened when Hillary won. The people who were told that Donald Trump was basically Satan incarnated, luckily he cannot lose. He's 90%, 77% chance that Hillary is going to win. All this stuff, and then Trump wins. That clash. These people went nutty. Now, a lot of people made fun of them, because, social justice warriors, and here's a toy, and here's, you're crying and you want a bottle or whatever. But this condition can be happening right here, where it's being actually either driven by people who are overzealous, excited, or whatever, or it could be malicious. It could be an actual, we'll call it a black ops or whatever word you want to call it, plan to build up all the people who are following Trump and Pedogate and whatnot and are saying, oh, all these things are happening. Oh, look at this. And they all get excited. And all of a sudden, Mueller comes out and, the president's arrested or removed from the White House, or there's some secret this and that, or a coup happens. And boom, that same thing will be used, will happen to the people who are the pro-Trump or anti-Pedogate, pro-Pedogate, all this stuff. Those same people get whacked. So I'm not picking on this site, and as I commented and talked with other people agree with me, and people were hoping that this might be true, but they weren't hanging their hat on it. Some are really sure about it. Another place I commented, I was removed as a troll because I simply brought up some issues that I thought were very important. Because if you really end up putting all your eggs in this basket, and then it falls apart, it's an emotional slam that gets your mind, you're unbalanced. It's like you're out of it's like getting hit in the head and you're stunned and you're slightly have a concussion or something, and you're not thinking and acting with your full consciousness and so forth. So this is really bothering me. It's all over the place. You just go through Facebook and you can't even just, I can't, let me just go to my, it won't work on this, right? Oh, it's working. Okay. This is my feed of people who are just posting, and this, I'm just doing this, impromptu here. I haven't searched, but as I kept going through looking at stuff, as I'm going through all the posts from the people who are on my friends list, I would go through and between the casseroles and the, so I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to get this. These are all just recently. But I was going through and I'm seeing all of these posts that are popping up about, yep, it's going to happen. And, no, I'm not going to. Here we go with this. Trump are draining the swamp. Here's the stuff going on. Here's another one back there. And it's just bothering me because I think you understand what I'm saying, right? And Mueller was in Uranium One and all this stuff. They're calling for his resignation because of all this stuff he has, right? And this guy supposedly has turned 180, and the 15 Democratic contributing lawyers that are working with him as well are all going to go along with this. And they're going to keep it completely silent so that nobody would leak to the Clinton cartel and associated members, warning them that this is coming so they could leave or whatever. They're not going to do that. And yet the leaks come out so that the pro-Trump, pro-pedophile crackdown people are encouraged about what's coming. It's amazing to me. And I'm not trying to criticize. I mean, I want this to happen. I would be happy as can be if this was to happen, right? I want this to happen. It'd be great. But looking at it, critical thinking, the odds are so far against it that it would be miraculous. And now, while there's been miraculous things along the Trump campaign, the fact he's still alive, for that matter, is given Kennedy and other issues, is still pretty good, pretty amazing. But I wanted to say that not to pull a rug out from anybody. In fact, what I'm trying to do is stop rugs from being pulled out on people because they have put their faith in this and are sucker punched if it doesn't happen. Or worse, the opposite happens where they march in and do something. Now, I also think, I mentioned this for a long time, that I think we're in the time of the revealing, a time of redemption, where people will change their directions. And one might argue that Trump, living a life perhaps as a minor type of a playboy, not really a playboy, but, jet setter, hotshot billionaire, has put that all aside and become, it kind of reminds me of that guy who sits on the, you go to a Renaissance fair, a guy will sit on a stump and throw insults at you, and people hurl tomatoes at him. It's kind of like what he did. He says, instead of being this rich jet set guy, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get tomatoes thrown at me all the time. And the whole mainstream media just completely focuses on, if not outright lies, completely ignores anything that I might do. It's good. Yeah, that sounds like fun, So, and he is not perfect, and he's far from infallible. So that, but in the same breath, things are happening and so on. So I guess my whole point here is I think what the miracle that will happen in here, and it's not really a miracle, is that they're not going to find anything on Trump. So they're trying to come up with the 24th Amendment, that he's unfit for office, and they're trying to find something to hang this on. And they're saying this to their mainstream media propaganda organs. He's unfit, he's unfit, he's unfit. But there's nothing really he's doing that's unfit. It's the opposite. So the more they keep saying this, the people who are greatly influenced by them and hypnotized by them are going along with that. Yeah, he's unfit, he's the worst president ever. But there's no data to support that. It's just a statement. It's just a belief. It's cognitive dissonance to what the reality is on that side. But what I'm trying to warn about is getting our own cognitive dissonance and think, this guy's Superman. They're going to come through and just clean everything up. Putin's involved. China's involved. We're going to just wipe the world. The stuff going on in Saudi Arabia is all part of it. No, I don't see that at all. In fact, I'm going to be talking with, try to get a hold of Jim Jatras, who is an expert, foreign affairs expert in that area, to talk about what's going on in Saudi Arabia. Maybe we can get that in the next couple of weeks. So this is really heavy on my mind, that this stuff's getting blown out of proportion. And we got to hold on. We got to keep calm here. And I think the prayers and efforts would be to restrain the politicians, both on the left and right, who are the anti-Trumpers, and the media, from creating the false narrative and making it, and having them have the cognitive dissonance, have them blow up, because what they're putting together doesn't get legs, and that's what I'd like to see more on that. Let me check whatever else I have down here. I did get an email from Ray. He's sent me some interesting emails, and I just put it up here for people to go look at, and we could talk about it another time. freesociety.com, that has apparently these guys got together. They're trying to purchase basically a country, trying to purchase land from a country that will allow them to break into their own country and kind of build it on libertarian principles. Now, first thing I think about this, just to throw this out in the front, is the whole Zeitgeist concept. Their solution was to have this technocracy type of a thing, and so that's in the background when I see this. But they claim to have the principles they want to have of very libertarianism in a more pure sense. So another issue to look at, and maybe we can talk about this again in another show, is I didn't see the whole interview. There's a live interview with Quinn Michaels, and I don't remember the name of the show, but I got a link to on. Let me actually go to Facebook here. If I'm doing this, I'm going to have to remove this. Now this screwed up again. Oh, I see. I guess it changes when I'm looking at my actual feed and when I'm looking at someone else's feed. All right. Here we go. Hold on. Stay tuned. There's the advantages, disadvantages of both live. And here it is, Quinn Michaels. But the gist of it, if I could just come out and just give you a little taste and you can watch it, see it, is that the whole Bitcoin is an AI project to get people to voluntarily use processor power to find in this blockchain, to find the Bitcoin, and the blockchain yields an answer, which is a Bitcoin, which they've given a monetary value to. Well, I should say it organically had a monetary value. People are trading it. And so that's the pay for creating this blockchain of code, which then gets plugged into the whole AI matrix. And so basically what they're doing is hiring, if I can use that, the AI would be hiring humans to add their personal processors or build whole mining operations that puts that processing power together to do their calculations. Now, what's the end result? I mean, it could be like it's our own enslavement. Anyway, you can listen to his articles. Now, I want to say Cliff High commented strongly against this. So whatever that's worth in that point. But it was very interesting. The concept of this was rather, it'd make a great movie, a great sci-fi movie. And, we're living in strange times, so you never know. But it's kind of a very unique concept, as well as, the blockchain is pretty unique, the whole Bitcoin thing. And speaking of Bitcoin, let me go to this. From last week, it's down 19%. It was actually down 20%. It's actually had been going up there. You could see at the bottom, it's been this dip. It's trying to rebuild, but then people sell again. And it's trying to go up again. But it's down almost $1,500 since last week. Ethereum is doing okay. And Litecoin as well. For themselves, they're not been blockbusters like Bitcoin, but I'm not worried. People have said why I assume maybe hopefully you sold off at the high point of 7,700, because right now it's almost down almost 2,000 from its highest of all time. And if I would have sold, I could have made $2,000 over what and bought back in again and made $2,000. But of course that's hindsight. You don't know if it's going to keep going down. You don't know when it's going to turn around, and then you're going to have to buy it on the upside. So it's always great to look back and say what you could have done. But I said myself is I'm in it for the long haul and lose it all, gain it all type of situation in terms of what I'm looking to do. But it is taking a significant downturn, and this, of course, hurts the reputation of it. So if you're going to move your money from some commodity or cash into this point, and if you would have done so, you would have lost 20% of your money. But I'm maintaining it's going to go up 10s, 20s, 100,000 more in the long term. But, you know, that's my point. But I wanted to mention that. Now, this free society, we'll talk about this another time. But I wanted to mention it so you guys can look into it to see if what you might think about this, and keep in the background technocracy and zeitgeist and their particular things that they were talking about. This might be completely different. I'm not trying to put a kibosh on it, but this is what I do: is I bring this stuff up, and people can. I've not heard about this at all. Ray wrote this. Never heard of it. Never saw it. I looked briefly around. Didn't see much about it. They have a Twitter account, but they've only had 7 tweets to date. So you can check that out. And if anybody wants to do some sleuthing and poking around and get back to me, you know, we can post this stuff and maybe have a segment on it and so on. I mean, I could try even reaching out to them. So back to we're going to get to Lionel, I promise. Colorado girl suing U.S. Attorney General legalized medical marijuana. Well, I'm so outraged by this whole thing. I wrote a little piece, and I'll just say it here. I cannot find words to express my disbelief and outrage in the outlawing of perhaps the greatest plant on Earth, nutritionally, medicinally, and utility speaking. Thank God for Canada, because even hemp is illegal to grow in America. The best I could trace the history of this crime against humanity, it goes back to the cotton and paper moguls, Hearst being the paper, at least. I don't know if he had the cotton mills, but he had the paper, who wanted to push out hemp, which made superior paper and clothing. They used a goofy movie to scare people about marijuana, whose spirit is alive today and used to justify the laws securing the control on the black market sales by the CIA, etc., and provide fodder to fill the private corporate prisons with inmates. Rounding out this triad of criminals is Big Pharma, which can make drugs that do not cure, but string you along and damage your brains until at worst you kill yourself or others, or at best you suffer the rest of your life. This is the crime that's going on, and put in kind of a perspective, other than like the pedogate, pedophilia, and child trafficking and child sacrifice and all that, torture and all that stuff, which has got to be the worst thing on the planet. This has to be one of the top contenders for what would be the crime of omission by making this illegal and preventing people from seeking it. So it's to me, it's just amazingly outrageous. Just amazingly outrageous. You know. So I just wanted to point that out there. I'm trying to go through here and see if there's anything I want to bring up here before we go to Lionel. As I'm moving these pictures by at lightning speed, you guys are all dizzy. Here's a request that I would have. I would like to, if you would click on this link, I'll put the links in the bottom here. But U.S. Representative Brian Babin, Republican from Texas, sent a letter to President Trump urging him to issue an executive order to delay the electronic logging device, the ELD, which all truck drivers, know about for now. There's so many problems in those laws that what I would request people to do is, if they have a Twitter account, to do this, to tweet this to President Trump. And I'm not saying he's going to sit and read all these things, but that they do tabulate. You know, all of a sudden you got 1 million people tweeting this stuff. It's going to get his attention. So just for the hell of it, kind of a Hail Mary at the last thing, because December 18th, I believe it is, it goes into effect, and what a mess it's going to be in the road. And while I'm compliant on one hand, I'm also exempt on the other. With my truck being in 1999, I don't have to have these devices. However, the company I'm at is mandating. They're saying they have them, so I'm kind of caught in the middle. But I'm compliant or exempt either way you look at it. but it's going to be a mess. And I would love to have this stuff overturned personally. So that's kind of I would say a personal. So there's the list. Okay. Yeah. I guess 300 million in cryptocurrency accidentally lost forever due to a bug. Yeah, this is the problem with the digital currency. It's like it's so safe nobody can see it unless there's a bug in the system. But this is because these people had their cryptocurrencies online in some kind of online wallet, and they were fixing the code, and then they lost access to it. And you can't hack into it because the encryption is very good. But if you lose the key, you're lost, man. I mean, you are lost. There's people who have lost hundreds of Bitcoin because a hard drive crashed or they forgot their passkey for their encryption and whatnot. So something really to remember there. All right. I'm trying to remember where I even put Lionel. So let me do a little introduction, because when we did this, I didn't introduce Lionel in the interview. Yeah, I was going to do some here. So Lionel Parkinson is an author and been on the show for The Holy Virus, which I recommend. Unrelated to the topic today, but I recommend for people who are Christians, or for that matter, non-Christian, people who are wanting to study the Bible and whatnot for whatever reason, that traces the corruption of some of the Bible scripture, along with the New Testament teaching of it, particularly by Paul, with Babylonian theology. Now, if you're offended by me even saying that, I don't know what to tell you. You know, you set the truth, and the truth will set you free, and just read it. And if you don't want to read it, that's fine too. But you have the website for that is holyvirus.net or .com, and what we have available is a PDF. What do you call it? A electronic version, and you have a hardcover version. And for Feet to listeners, I'm going to say this. Actually, I should look this up here. You want to on the old website. Here we go. The feet2fire.com. It's the old website. It's on here. There's a link that lets you go to this, and if you have the special user of F2F, that's a number 2F, and the password of holyvirus50, you can get in through a certain page, which will give you a significant discount on it. And Lionel's just doing it for our listeners. He's just, just taking the hit for the cost of the hardcover book out of the profits, probably at a loss, just for the sake of helping people who are listening to the show. And you can get it that way. There's a Kindle edition for $7 as well for this book. That's his main thing, and I want to I don't have my webpage thing on here. There is the information. If you go to feet2fire.com, scroll on, you'll see this, and you will be able to click on this link right and go in and enter the password and the username to get that discount. Now, that's his main site. And what he has done here is put together a series of, and I wonder if I can get to, here we go. Going to be more. We're going to have to do this, then do this. Scroll down. And he has done a series of shows before, presentations, I should say. I don't say it's a show. Is gold not safe? Now, it was his first one when he talked about, he made a lot of money in gold in the past, but he is warning of how it is also inflated because it's now a commodity, which we talk about in the show. Another one is coming of negative interest rates and what it means for your savings, and it's happened in the world, so this is precedence. Then he did a show on how you can actually make money and at least protect your money. If you do have large sums of money, how you can protect them for when the bank crashes and will take your money, and you can actually make some money in negative interest rates. And I think one of the best shows was the ETF short selling funds of certain markets. So if you have no money, and for as little as like $13, you can buy a share in a fund which sells short the market, that when this same share, back the last time it crashed, went to $100,000 a share, currently at $13. So if you have $13 in your pocket and you can go online and get a free account with these E-Trade places, you buy a share, and now you got something to back you up in terms of a crash. So something as little as that. Now, he went through detail on this episode. I got all the links here. This will be, all these links are going to be down. How do I do this? Down below. They're already posted. And you can re-listen to any of these types, things to go along with the show I'm going to play. And he's going to explain why this happens. And he himself has the experience of actually making hundreds of thousands in gold. And he said to me, which we talk about in the interview, had I known what I know now, he would have been a multimillionaire using these same techniques because it already happened. But now, using history and the cycles and how things are, another crash is coming, and these funds are so cheap because right now the markets are zooming. Record highs. So why would anybody bet against it? So this is the context we're doing for the show. And that he's here by phone, though we do have a lot of visual stuff to put together in this recorded interview. And I can't tell you how much I recommend people really pay attention and listen, because he lays it out very simply, giving data, giving history, giving experts who and the mechanisms and the laws, the Dodd-Frank laws, and the changing of the Glass-Steagall, how all of this is happening, that when you put your money in the bank, it's not your money anymore. It's the bank's money. You've given them an unsecured loan. And they can actually limit you taking it out, and have done it in other countries. They can take money off the top to pay their debts, and they have done it in other countries. This is what's waiting down the road, and this big, high, overvalued stock market is giving the illusion that we're just everything's all wonderful. So anyway, let me get to Lionel. We can go through all this. I'll risk going through it haphazardly now. I have to find where I put his. There it is. This is the one. So we'll have Less Visible, and I'll be here in the chat room to talk along the way here, because it's a live broadcast. This part's recorded, but that's how we had to do it to get Lionel here. And at the end, we'll have comments by Less Visible. Now we'll go to Lionel Parkinson. All right. Well, I want to welcome Lionel back to Feet to the Fire. And how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you take this time to share these things with us, because, well, first off, they're not really commonly shared openly anyway. And what listeners and watchers will see today is that this information is out there. This is not something that you kind of invented in some kind of delusional fantasy, and that there are methods to this madness to explain why gold, silver, and so forth, the traditional methods of surviving some type of financial catastrophe, just won't be enough. And that you have shared in previous videos, which are all linked below, by the way. If you can go down there, I have all the links. You can watch them. You've gone into good detail in explaining these various methods of whether you have a lot of money or you have very little money. You have various scenarios that people can take advantage of in the next coming crisis and crashes that will preserve your wealth or create wealth, for that matter. And that we were talking, and we were going to do this show about kind of the nuts and bolts of why. And so I appreciate you taking your time and sharing sharing freely of this information.
Yeah, the important thing about this program is the timing of it all. If we did this, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, it would the timing wouldn't be right. But since we are, in my educated opinion at the end of another bull market, even though probably the last phase, that could be, as far as seeing the credit system expand itself out to the point where it can't expand itself much further. What I'm going to do on this program is give the best educated guess on from my point of view, why we're going to see not only a crash, but probably the worst one that this country and the world has ever experienced, and why it's so important to get things right, to understand if you have some money, how to preserve it, and where to hold it is going to be the next important aspect of what to do with your money. And the reason why I believe we're going to experience another crash, and in my opinion, the worst one yet, is based upon the laws that have been passed since the last crash that occurred in the 2008-2009 era, at the time when the presidents were handing the baton from George Bush to Barack Obama. The timing of this was, on a political level, very clever. That way, Barack Obama would not be going into office taking the full blame. And George Bush, of course, claimed no party to it. But it was all instigated and perpetrated by the bankers. And just to give you a quick history of what the bankers did, all we have to do is go back. As you may know, that back in the 1920s, banks could trade with their depositors' money. They could leverage it hundreds of times if they liked. They did this in the derivatives market of the time that were called trusts. Now, for a while, things went great. It was nonstop party time. The roaring 20s were born, and Wall Street and the average people alike toasted their prosperity. Everyone was sure the good old days would never end. But there was a basic problem. The boom wasn't based on manufacturing or advances or greater productivity or even on technological breakthroughs. It was a speculative orgy, a bubble fueled by record amounts of hot leveraged money. And like all bubbles, this one burst, and the banks had gambled with all the America's money, and they lost. And this shook the global economy to its very foundations. So in 1933, they came up with the Glass-Steagall Act, which took away the bank's ability to gamble with people's deposits. And from 1933 to 1999, this country pretty much was stable. There was no major crashes. There was some recessions, but nothing that was speculative, and nothing that got out of hand that would, destroy people's lives. And then, I remind your audience that about 6 million people during the Great Depression starved to death because of what the bankers did with their money. So in 1999, when Bill Clinton finally got rid of or repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, it allowed the bankers to open the door to do again what they did in the Roaring 20s, and that is gamble with people's bank accounts. And this brought on the crashes, especially the serious one in 2008 and 2009. It's very important to understand this history because we're now living in a time era where it's worse now than it was in 8 years ago. We now have laws that allow the banks, so when they go insolvent, they don't have to declare any insolvency. They simply, by law, through the Dodd-Frank bill, they're simply allowed to pull their money out of the depositors' accounts and shore up their losses. Now, I'll read a section out of what I gave you was called the San Diego Free Press. And even though it's probably on the second page, it reads, like this. It starts out, how do they do this, you ask? Simple. When you deposit money in checking or savings account, that money no longer belongs to you. Technically and legally, it becomes the property of the bank, and the bank just issues you what amounts to an IOU. As far as the bank is concerned, it's an unsecured debt. Now, the way the Dodd-Frank bill has managed to mess things around, the derivatives bets the banks have made in the Wall Street casino have priority over your checking and savings accounts when it comes to paying off their debts. And don't think that the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, will save your money. The assets of the FDIC are minuscule in the billions. Compared to the valuation of outstanding derivatives in the trillions, your deposits are protected only up to $250,000 insurance limit, and also only to the extent that the FDIC has the money to cover deposit claims or can come up with it. Now,
that's very important to realize that it only covers it up to the amount of the money that it has available for paying this. And once they run out, it doesn't matter if you have $1 in the bank or 10 million, you're SOL.
Yeah. So the next question that comes to my mind, I think, in another document called the U.S. Deposits in Perspective, tells us exactly how much money the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation really has, and this is an account that the banks are supposed to deposit money into in case they do get insolvent. It's kind of like a small insurance company. But they admit they only have $25 billion in the FDIC.
Now, I do have, at this moment, I do have up this graph that Zero Hedge had put together, and for people looking, you can see that the blue arrow is pointing to this little line and says that's 25 billion. And then the next line, which is the deposits at U.S. Commercial Bank. The first one is how much they have available for insurance. The next one shows how much deposits are there, which is 9,283 billion. So you could see that just that alone dwarfs the amount of insurance they have. And then they show, you see this big red line, which doesn't even fit on the screen. I have to scroll up to the top to show it. That's 297 trillion, 514 billion that are in the derivatives exposure. And so the Dodd-Frank's bill, as you said, it allows the banks to claim your money. When you put it in there, it's an unsecured loan, and they have, let's say they own it in the same way where you can have a credit card, for example, and if you buy a television with that on credit, you own, quote, the television, but you bought it with their money, and it's an unsecured loan, so if you go bankrupt, they can't come take the television because it's an unsecured loan. They don't have security on what you do with it. Now, when you put your money in the bank, the same thing happens. You're giving them your money. They could do what they want with it. Now, if they lose that money, you don't have a way to get it back in a sense that the insurance that's there will be gobbled up, within minutes. And the priority on which the, let's say the bank goes into a kind of default and there is some type of, they own property or whatever, they have some kind of money, that gets gobbled up by number one, which is the derivatives. And if in the unlikely event there's any left over, it gets gobbled up in the commercial bank stuff, which there won't be any left because look at the amount of it. And your insurance is long gone. So basically, when you give your money to the bank, you're saying, here, invest this whatever way you want. And if you feel like it, pay me back.
Yeah, so that's exactly what's going on. Whereas in the 2008-2009 crash, when a bank went insolvent, it tripped a lot of the other bad loans in other banks, and they could not grab people's deposits back then. Not quite as legal as it is now. Now, when a bank goes under and insolvent, they by law are told not to declare insolvency. They are by law now supposed to take people's money without them knowing it and shore up their losses and be quiet. So to give this all a proper perspective, you have $25 billion insuring $9 trillion, well, $9.5 trillion now, of people's so-called alleged savings and checking accounts. But what they don't realize, back in the 2008-2009, they used taxpayer bailouts. This time, by law, they have been using bail-ins. This is not a future issue. This is something that's been going on as these banks have been ripping and losing money right and left. They have been using that $9,283 billion accounts to shore up their accounts and continue the gambling in the casino. So we don't know how much of this that they've lost. So the next crisis that comes around, not only are they used up the insurance, but they've used up the taxpayer bailouts, but now they probably have used up all the $9 trillion, and they are by law to gamble into the stock market that money so they can pump up their own stocks. In fact, corporations practice this very same rule as well. They will borrow way beyond what they could ever pay back and buy their own stock so they can pump it up. And this is for the purpose so that they, on the higher level, can get their own personal money out of the stock market at these higher prices until the game runs out. And so that's why I believe this kind of evidence is indicating to me that the next crash is going to be far worse than the Great Depression, far worse than the so-called Great Recession that we had 2008, 2009. There will be no backstops. There will not be any insurance this time. And this all leads me to want to do this program and give people a better idea of what to do with what money they have, because I think when this crash does hit, a lot of jobs will be lost. A lot of corporations will be going under because there are no longer any AAA-rated corporations in this country. They've all borrowed to, I think at least, the last figure that I've taken a look at, well over $8 trillion. And they don't have $8 trillion to ever pay that back. So when they go under, these corporations will go under just like the banks. So
let me stop there for 1 second. Going back to this San Diego Free Press article, the links will be below. I highly recommend you read it. It's from January 2nd, 2015, and it is so this is a few years ago, and he lays it out. This John Lawrence lays it out very plainly, exactly the consequences and purposes of the Dodd-Frank law and what it does, so that, again, to show you that this stuff is not being invented in Lionel's head. This stuff is factual. It's out there. It was planned. This is the point. And just like if you go back in time to the Federal Reserve Act, there was a plan behind it, and it had to be lobbied because people saw the plan, and it failed, and they tricked with a new Christmas Eve. They got it in, and some say they didn't get the quorum and whatnot. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens. Obamacare comes to mind when they had to do all kinds of arm twisting. You can't read it till it's passed because there's nefarious stuff in there. And so this article is a great, if you want to read one thing to understand what Lionel was talking about, this would be a good point. Of course, adding in the FDIC fallacy to understand that and underscore what you just said is that they used up all of the safeguards they've had in the past so that any future crash, they won't have these things to fall back on. Like we've talked many times off the air, that if it wasn't for the massive amount of money that they put in this last crash, 2008 or whatever, they were The whole thing might have crashed then. The whole thing might have came down worldwide, but they were taking this money and making like a fire break and just pouring it into the banks. We didn't get any of it. You notice the inflation didn't go up really high because it never hit the ground. It stayed in this digital wasteland and made the numbers. It gave banks money to work with when they didn't have any. They changed the law so that you can now fudge, basically legally fudge your books and make it look nice. And this is what we've been running on. And at some point, the laws of mathematics and gravity, so to speak, is going to even make these practices not enough.
Right. It's astounding what's going on. And what's even another thing that's really bothering me is the amount of analysts that I believe that are seeing the same things that I'm seeing are not getting it correct, and they're telling people to invest in certain investment vehicles. One of them, of course, is gold and silver. And I sent you another document done by a man back in 2010 that recorded 90 so-called professional gold and silver analysts and got their predictions of back in 2010 what gold would do in the upcoming years. And if you have that up, you'll see the name and the prediction right with the name. Now, you would have 90 of them that, in my opinion, got it all wrong. And the reason why they got it wrong is because they don't understand the fundamentals of what we're really dealing with. Gold and silver today is not the monetary system originally created in the Constitution. In Article 1, Section 10, it said no state shall use anything but gold and silver as legal tender and payment of debts. That was the old rule. Today it is traded as a commodity, and it's no different than oil or peanuts or pork bellies. And they don't understand that it fluctuates based on the value of the dollar. Now, in a highly inflated dollar, the price of gold and silver will go up. But in a deflationary times, let's say in a crash, gold and silver, oil, all these commodities go down because there's no push price inflation in the economy to drive prices up. So in the next crash, what you will see is the price of gold and silver actually collapsing, not increasing like so many analysts got it wrong in the past. They will get it wrong again. You're not going to see a collapse in the dollar. It will still remain. And this is why I believe it's very important to understand how to maintain your dollars. Not all dollars are created equal. If you have put your dollars in a bank...
Hold on. Let me stop there. I like that phrase. Not all dollars are created equal. But before we go there, for the people who are just listening, I'm going to just read a couple of these people. I'll just random. I mean, I don't know. I've heard of some of them, but I don't know who is more important than others. But just some of the examples. Peter Schiff being one of the people. He said gold could reach 5,000 to 10,000 per ounce in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, being 2010, that means from 2015 to 2020, gold can go between 5 and 10,000. Well, it's halfway there, and it's not near the 5,000 mark at all. So you have David Rosenberg is talking about 5,300. You have ELF Field, 10,000. Fox Traders, 3,000 to 4,000. Barry Schultz, 6,000. Ergon von Geres, over 7,000. With a caveat being between 5 and 10,000. Peter Cooper, 5,000. Rob McEwen, 5,000. And here's another one, 5,000. 10,000 by 2012 is Arnold Block, you know, and there's the list. These are people who have, I've been saying this. This is in 2010. These people are looking at it like Lionel just underlined, like you just said. They're looking at it in a wrong perspective. No one thinks about the dollar actually devaluating. I mean, is that right? What's the word? Deflating. Deflating. They always think of it inflating. And I've heard people talk about they compare it to back in Germany in pre-World War II with the great inflation. But then I've heard, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, talking about the big hit that happened to Germany was when, after it inflated, it deflated, which was the real coffin nail to their economy. That really hit them hard after all of that other stuff. So that's important to realize that gold is nowadays looked at compared to the dollar. And if the dollar inflates, fine. But if it deflates, the dollar will be actually better, than gold. But no, well, if you want to comment, go ahead. But then,
yeah, I was just going to mention that in a deflationary depression, any dollars, even though they're not backed by anything, even though they're not backed by gold and silver like prior to 1933. I should back up and say the dollar is actually backed by something today, but it's not gold and silver. It's actually backed by slavery of the U.S. taxpayer. It is backed by the extortion measures of the Internal Revenue Service. The Treasury Department that you make out your check to at every springtime is always the collection agency for or I should say the Internal Revenue Service, and is the collection agency for the U.S. Department. So the dollar is really backed by the hard work and the taxation of the people, the citizenry of this country. That's the cold, hard facts. In order to have a credit system, you have to have the foreign countries have a reason to invest their dollars into the U.S. dollar for a purpose and a reason. They need to know that they can get it back in the future. And if they see, let's say, massive tax cuts go into effect in this country, and the money goes back to the people, then that money is stripped away from the U.S. Department of Treasury because they're not collecting as high taxes, and the confidence in the dollar will actually go down. So the only thing that really supports the dollar is slavery. That's what it really runs on. And the U.S. Department of Treasury admits that their full faith and credit is simply based on taxation. And that is what secures the dollar to this day. Now, the difference between putting your money in a bank, it changes the status of your dollar or the status of the depositor. You become an unsecured creditor. Whereas when you put your money in the U.S. Treasury Department under your name, let's say you take your $1,000 and invest it in U.S. Treasury Department.gov, you become the bank, and the U.S. government you become the secured creditor, and the government becomes the borrower. And they are guaranteeing you that you will get your principal back and a little bit of interest based upon the slavery tactics of the U.S. government using taxpayers to back up your account. Whereas the bank, when you put that money in, you're the unsecured creditor. The ownership of that money goes over to the bank, and they can gamble it in the stock market and pump it up as high as it is to this day. They can use leverage on top of that money as well. These are the games that they're playing. And this, unfortunately, is the world we live in. So in the next crash, it causes a deflationary depression. It drives prices down and the dollar up in value. And what will even drive the value of the dollar higher this time, instead of just lowering interest rates, I believe that they will go negative interest rates in order to keep the game going yet once again. Eventually, there is an end game, and that is a destruction of the dollar, but I believe that is not this next time. And I think that's what a lot of the gold and silver analysts are trying to allude to, that they believe that we are in that last time era where everything collapses in the credit system. But as for me, no, I don't buy into that. I see the rich people pouring their money into the same areas that they did in the last area, the U.S. Treasuries and offshore accounts. They're doing the same thing as they did before, because they know the same thing is going to happen as before, only a lot worse. So in my opinion, right now, for the average person, it is to get your money out of the bank and into your own hands. If you want to make 10 times the value of your dollar in the next Great Depression, you want that money in your hands, and that is the safest place it's going to be. Nobody's going to treat your money better than you yourself. Do not give it to the banker. Do not give it to Wall Street. And do not trust any analyst that tells you to put it in gold and silver. It isn't going to work. Not at these lofty prices at around $1,200-1,300 an ounce. The price of gold and silver is not much more overvalued than the stock market. The stock market is running on a Shiller's price-to-earnings ratio at about 30 times value. I mean, that means any stock that you're buying right now out there on average is 30 times what it's really worth in the real world. And in the cases of Facebook, Google, Netflix, and Apple, some of those are trading at 130 times earnings, at 130 times what they're really worth, and yet people are still buying it. Or I should say corporations with borrowed money and central banks pouring money into the stock market because they want a higher stock market. And this creates the perfect mechanism to sucker people's hard-earned money into a game that they can bet on the downside at a later date when they have the inside information when this game comes to an end.
Now, let me step in here for a minute. I'll give you an example about what you just said about the overvalue. If anybody has ever seen Shark Tank, and I've watched it on occasion, people have come in and offered the sharks to get in on their business, and they give it a price. It will give you, I need the $100,000 for 10% of my business or whatever. So immediately they start taking that pad of paper and they're writing on it, and inevitably what they always mention is, how much have you made? What are your earnings? What's your profit? And they'll tell them. And then they go back to their pad and says, what you're telling me is, today your company is worth this amount based on your profit to expense earnings ratio and all that. And what you're asking me for is to pay 100 times or 20 times or 50 times or 10 times more than the value right now, because you say in the future you're going to make more. So you're making me pay for the future value today. And they all lambast them for doing that. And what you're just saying is these companies are 30 to 100 times overvalued, and people are buying them now based on someday, and there's no guarantee, of course, someday they'll be worth that and more. And so now this has become rampant across the whole spectrum. So now you have you just have the example of the Shark Tank people wouldn't be doing it because they're betting on a future which they're already paying for the return before the return even comes in. And then at that point, then they might make money.
Yeah, it's a highly speculative orgy going on out there, and people are trying to find some way to quickly make money. And when they see these market's going up and up and up, they are being sucked into it, thinking that they can get in and out with a profit. But eventually there is an end game. And what causes ultimately a crash is all this borrowed, leveraged money out there that really just is never paid back. And it comes to a point, comes to a head, and then all of a sudden you can't drive up the stock market any higher than it is, and then it comes down and creates a big fat bubble, kind of like what Trump said on the campaign when the stock market was only around 17,000. He said it was a big fat bubble. Well, now that it's 23,500, all of a sudden he doesn't talk about it as a big fat bubble. This is all based upon what they tell us is the so-called tax cuts that the people are going to receive, which I think is nothing more than a scam. I don't think the U.S. Treasury is going to tolerate any tax cuts of anything significant amounts, because that would touch the so-called perception of the value of the dollar. Ultimately, this comes down to one thing. The rich want to get richer, and they can't do it with a dollar that decreases in value. So they will find some way to make tax cuts for the billionaires and the millionaires, and the average person continue paying the taxes that they normally pay or normally have paid in the past. So we're living during an administration that cannot get anything done. They will not work with this president, and I don't think they're going to work with him on this tax cut either. And when reality hits the wall, they'll realize that this bubble on top of a bigger fat bubble is going to burst, and you're going to have a massive collapse. You're going to have the corporate $1 trillion that collapses, the commercial real estate collapse. There's so many areas out there, student loans, mortgage loans. I mean, the mortgage loan alone in this country is around $14.5 trillion on homes out here. Can you imagine the value of the price of these homes when this collapse hits? It's going to be staggering.
We saw a little bit of that happen already. You know, in this collapses where you had people in California paid $500,000 for their house, and the same house down the block was going for $125,000 post collapse. You know, so they were all upset because of their house money, and I'm thinking like, well, you shouldn't have paid $500,000 to begin with. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
If I can go back though, I want to mention I think we may have, at least I have in my mind, and maybe somebody listening. We were talking about the not all dollars are created equal, and I don't know if we actually went down that road specifically. And what do you mean by not all dollars are created equal?
What I was referring to is when you put your dollar in a bank, it changes the status of that dollar and you to unsecured monetary system, because it just goes into their hands and they can do with it whatever they want. So it actually just trades hands, so that dollar doesn't become your dollar, it becomes their dollar. Whereas when you put it in your hand, it's under your control. Therefore, in a depression, it would gain, I'm just guessing, of course, about 10 times its pricing power.
Okay, so let's start off. We have the dollar bill, and I don't have one to show. Yeah, dollar bill in your hand is one type of dollar. Then you have the dollar bill that's in the bank, which is digital. Which is digital money, which is another type of dollar. And in a collapse, which has already happened, we've seen it happen in with Cyprus, where they literally just skimmed off the top of their digital money and said, you know, we owe you. You know, when things get better, we'll pay you back someday. You know, wink, wink. So, but if you have your dollar in your hands, the equivalent would be somebody coming to your house and confiscating that money. Would be the same thing, but it's not actually going to happen that way, because if it's digital, they can just go in a computer and you can't fight back, so to speak. And legally you can't either because of the Dodd-Frank bill.
The same thing applies to if you put your money in a money market fund in a bank. That money market money that you put in still belongs to the bank because it's going to be ultimately under their name. So when they finally hit the old insolvent button, that money is no different than a checking account, a savings account. But if you put your money in a money market account, maybe under, let's say, a futures and options account, it would be more or less under your name rather than other than theirs. But when you put your money in a U.S. Treasury, it is under your name. And that's the difference. So you'll own it on a digital level, but at least it's under your name and it's not being gambled away into the banking derivative casino. So it's very important to understand when I'm saying that not all dollars are created equal. It's because it's where you're placing those dollars changes your status from whether you're the owner or an unsecured lender. And that's the it's a dangerous world to go into this digital world without knowing what it really does to you in the proper status. If it's like I say in a bank, it's no longer yours. All the laws are against you, and there is no insurance that's going to cover it. You might as well just throw it out on the streets for someone to pick it up. It's actually that no different. But if it's in your hands, it's in your mattress or wherever you decide to put it, at least it's under your control. And in a deflationary depression, it will actually serve you much better than gold and silver. If I had to put a prediction on what the next crash will do to the gold and silver markets, it would stagger you how low the price will go this next time. I would think it would go lower than it did in the year 2000, and that was right around 300 an ounce.
Now, I want to mention this to people that this is coming from the mouth of a guy who, and I don't think I'm betraying any confidence here, that at one point basically sold everything he had and bought gold. It went up, it increased from that low price, and then which case he sold it. So he made a pile of money on gold. So it's not like he's an anti-gold guy in some emotional sense. It's just that along the way, as Lionel told me, he had learned more about what he was doing, and if he could go back in time, he could have made even more with the knowledge he has now based on how this stuff works. So it's not like this guy has got an axe to grind. As I mentioned in the intro, he doesn't have a fund. He's not selling a newsletter. He's not. If you follow his advice, he does not get any money by it. I'm not paying him to be here. He is offering his time, to help you. Plus, he's been through the gold market and successfully. So if the gold would have been a way to do it, he'd be doing it. So this is why I wanted to bring it up at this time, Lionel.
Yeah, I do have a lot of experience in the gold and silver arena. I've dealt with dealers for a good full decade, and there was times when I lost some too, but not that significant. But when I saw a price that was so low, I did go all out. I did literally sell my home and bought it. And the same thing as I'm seeing right now with the stock market is way overpriced, but I still see the possibility of it going considerably higher. There is one other area that I want to address really quickly, and that is Bitcoin.
Okay.
Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that has been coming online for several years now. That is starting to get a lot of attention. I personally do not invest in Bitcoin because I don't have enough knowledge on it. But what knowledge I'd like to share with it, now that I see it rocketing up, is the fact that there is no mechanism out there to knock it down just yet. They have not created short-selling ETFs just yet. They're filing for short-selling cryptocurrency ETFs, but they have not got them through yet. And I suspect that your cryptocurrencies will continue, especially like Bitcoin, to go up until the bankers decide to go and bet on the downside. The only thing that could knock Bitcoin down now is the crash that I'm referring to in the stock market, where liquidity is sucked out of the economy, is sucked out of the banks, sucked out of everything based on the fact that nobody can pay back anybody through all this borrowed leverage hot money. That's the only thing that could knock Bitcoin down. But when you start seeing short-selling ETFs, that's the beginning of the end of anything, because what happens is central banks will reverse their positions, get on the opposite side when they see the price is high enough, and then they'll just plow it right back into the ground.
I will mention I have a chart up that shows from 1 year from today, the price of Bitcoin went up $5,435, which doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, which is 772%. It was what was the? I'm trying to look here. It was under $700 a year ago, and now it is currently at $61.39. But I will say, if we go back to the last week, it is down 1,000 in the last week. And if you go into the last day, you could see the volatility of it. And basically what people are doing, in my opinion, is they reached a certain, every time it reaches an emotional point, like it reached up to 7,000, I think it was 7,700 it reached, and then people take profit, and then it goes down. Well, it usually goes down under 1,000, and then it goes back up higher level. This time has been a more of a dip. But as you can see in the last day, you still have these dips and then increases. So people sell it, it gets down to a weight, and they buy it back again. And it's kind of, that's what seems to be driving it, as opposed to any of the forces that, Lionel, you were referring to. So for those who are in it at this moment, I don't see the over 1,000 it lost in was it last week? What is it? Down $1,000. That's not what you're talking about, because the mechanisms that you're talking about aren't in place.
Correct, yes. It could, and I'm just saying hypothetically with no experience in cryptocurrencies, I just know that any market that doesn't have a mechanism to drive it down tells me that it has potential to go much higher if the central banks continue pouring their money into it and trying to drive it up to try and get as much what I call sucker money into it. It's called the pump and dump, and it was applied in the 1920s when they used to use, corporations would use an insider on the headlines papers. They'd pay some guy off to talk about a particular stock that the insiders had already dumped their money into, knowing full well that they could get a lot more money into that and pump the stock up. And then when they saw it high enough, the insiders got out, and leaving those that got in late with a price that collapsed on them. No different. Bitcoin will be treated no different by the central banks than those guys did back in the roaring 20s. It's just another mechanism to get people involved. But it is interesting to see that it is a competing currency, and it may very well be used in the long term to be used to travel safely and without having to take your cash. So I can see some potential behind it in that respect. But once I hear central bankers pouring their money into it, that tells me right there that they earmark it for a future crash.
So they're buying it now, which should be low, even though technically it's high by, you go back a year, but they're buying it now. They're going to hype it up, and then they'll sell high, but they need a mechanism. Right now there's rumors and innuendos, which is semi-effective in that people who are getting in it, kind of skittishly, and not really knowing about it, and so when they can hear a rumor and they can pull out, or they can just say, well, look, every time it goes up $500, I'm going to sell, and then if it goes up another 500 past that, then I'll buy it, sell it again, and do that kind of thing. But that's not going to crash it. They're going to have to come up with something. And they did a couple things have happened. Like, for example, rumor came up that China was going to outlaw it, but then that wasn't even true. China came up and corrected it, and they said, no, we're going to have to control the markets selling it because of corruption and whatnot. And, maybe they want a piece of the action, whatever it is. So, but I can see if there's a money to be made in its crash and there's a mechanism to crash it, it will crash. So,
especially when central bankers had poured in so much money. Remember, it creates a bubble that they can get out with quick notice, and it just leaves a lot of overpriced investors with a much lower price, and it creates a speculative down pressure. And this is what's seen in every market. It doesn't matter, stock market, gold, silver, commodities, currencies. Unfortunately, they've taken a very good idea like a cryptocurrency, and I think they'll try and destroy it, even though when it does go back and reset, like all markets do, I think it's a good, viable reason to use it to transfer your wealth, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the downside to that, and what I think what one of the volatility aspects is that you're going to transfer a bunch of wealth and you buy the appropriate amount of Bitcoins on it. I mean, when you're talking about, let me just go for the last week, it was a 15%, it lost 15% in 1 week. You can buy high, not knowing it's high, and then by the time you transfer your wealth back into whatever currency you want or commodity, you lost 15% of what you started with. But on the other hand, you can easily gain that 15% because if you go back far enough, in the month it went up 9%, in the year it's 700%. So, it's kind of volatile, but it is very private, and there's another shows on this to show the advantages of how you can do it and what it is and the risks of losing it by, forgetting your password, so to speak, could mean you've lost $1 million. So you have to really, there are some very mature type of learning curve you need if you're going to be doing $1 million transfers and so on. But I don't want to digress out of this bucket. So the idea being is that the physical dollar, the dollar bill you hold in your hand or in your mattress, as it were, is really the safest thing to do for this upcoming crash because, and I've said this before, and if you look at it in terms of supply and demand, most people won't even argue with that. If there is like what it happens with vegetables, if there's a blight or something, then the price goes up, or milk, if there's the cow diseases, the less you have, the more value it is to the person who wants it, therefore the price goes up. Well, if you're going to buy and sell, if you're a businessman, you got a store, and all of the digital currencies have been shut down on a bank holiday, which has happened in several places in the world, you got product. What are you going to do? Walmart won't take gold, though. As a side note that a lot of Walmarts do have ATM machines for Bitcoin, but I'm sure that'll be turned off as well in the system. You come in there with dollar bills, the price goes down to you because they need something. That dollar now buys more milk, and when Walmart has that dollar, they can actually do business, which they can't do with the digital currency. So even just on a supply and demand logic, the dollar would be best to have in at least a short-term crash.
Yes, and this country has not gone through a Great Depression for about 85 years. So our minds, our investment techniques, everything that we've done since then has been built upon an inflationary environment. Very few people can think in terms of, okay, well, how do I prepare for a deflationary environment? And dollars is the only thing that I can think of that will go up in value while stocks and commodities will actually deflate in value because they've been artificially propped up with borrowed money that will never be paid back in the future. So this is so-called my educated guess based upon past performances in our history. I'm still sticking with history this time around as to back up my opinion, and give it to you on this program, because I feel like we are going to experience one of the worst depressions ever, and it will last many, many years. I want people to get it right this time, because I don't want to see millions of people starving to death like the last time it happened. And the Federal Reserve chairmen are all admitted they are not going to bail out the banks this time. They have no mechanism to do it this time around. And even though Janet Yellen did come out and gave out the statement that she believes it will never happen again like it did before, well, all the mechanisms in place right now indicate that she's wrong. It will happen again, and it will happen on such a magnitude that there will be no bailouts, and there will not be any bail-ins. There'll just be a few banks that will survive, and but the dollar, I think, will actually soar like never before. So,
let me
in my opinion,
let me just say about the dollar soaring. Now, say I have $1,000 in the bank. Now it gets closed off because of this problem. I take some kind of a haircut. Now I could take a complete haircut and get nothing back, right? Because there's no FDIC; it's drained already. They owe the money. So
correct.
The dollar soaring in the bank is not the case, because depending upon how much I have in there and how bad the bank is, the bank totally goes under, then I have nothing, right? So you're still talking about the dollar that is not in an electronic form soaring.
Correct. I'm referring to the dollar that is in the paper form that you stick in your wallet, your
right.
purse. Yeah, it's very important to have physical cash.
Now, I want to also mention when Russia went through its transition from the Soviet to what it's currently, in the interim, the U.S. dollar was like the de facto currency, but it was only in paper form. That they literally had plane loads of dollar bills, I mean, various denominations, were flown into Russia to be used as the currency, and it was all based on this actual money in hand philosophy. So there's kind of a working example there where it wasn't even the U.S. dollar digitally that did the trick. It was the physical dollar.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention that in your, I have it up on the screen now. It will be on my website. It'll be in the notes below. That this is not your first visit here on this topic. We have a show about, you explain about gold not being safe, and you explain about the coming negative interest rates. But then in the latter two shows, you gave people suggestions about what they can do to survive this coming issue. And the one show you did is, if you do have money in the bank, you do have something. Maybe you got $100,000. You got some. You have various retirement funds or what have you.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that on a percentage basis, I would say that this is what I would do. 80% of what you have, you want to stick in cash. If you're able, if you're not too rich. A lot of times, if people are too rich, that's too much cash to hold around. But if they want to speculate, use 5 or maybe 10% that they can afford to lose. And I would believe that if I would have had this knowledge 9 years ago, I'd be a multimillionaire right now, based upon what I know right now. And there are certain shorting ETFs, which are electronic trading funds, that will bet that a market will go down. However, they get slaughtered while the stock market goes up and up and up in this last euphoric phase. So you have to be aware that you will lose money if you invest in these types of speculative electronic trading funds until that crash occurs, and then they reverse themselves, and they reverse themselves really fast, and they make far more money than you could ever make in a stock market bull run. These particular ETFs will make probably 1,000 times more than an ETF on the long side. And I gave out 4 recommendations that I believe will survive the bull run and stay active until the stock market takes a nosedive. And one is the financials, banks. If you want, I can give those over the...
Yeah, you can, but
I
also what I do is I have a link on screen and will be there to your actual show you did, presentation, where you go into detail on these. So you could say them so somebody can look them up now, yeah. And but the link is there for the for like the hour-long presentation to give the whole ball of wax on it. Now I by the way have took your advice, and since I bought into them modestly, it has went down. But the history of these funds and the mechanism is it's phenomenal. I mean, you can buy 100, you could buy 10, shares of one of these funds for $130, and that one of those, if it repeated the last crash, which is going to be far worse than that, one of them went up to 100,000. So you buy 10 shares, it's $1 million. So this is the kind of, now granted, the crash is not a good thing. You don't want to hope for a crash. So I like the way you phrase this as insurance as opposed to an investment, is that if all else fails and the crash comes, you can survive. The banks are closed, the jobs are lost, and yet you can still get literally millions of dollars in this system. But it will lose, and it has. The fund has gone down,
right.
Since I bought. But for how much I put in, it's an insurance policy.
Yeah, I'm quite a contrarian to the way most people think. But if someone is going to speculate this and they don't want their account to lose money, they can do this. They can take like $500 and bet on the short ETFs. That I made recommendations on the other show, and use just the opposite ETFs on the long side, and that will keep your account neutral until the collapse hits. And the worst you'll lose is maybe $500 that you had on the long side and gain $1 million on the short side. So it's a like I say, a poor man's way of getting back at the bankers.
And you can even buy one share for $13, and you have a chance of going with it. That's that one fund went up to 100,000 back in 2008, 9. So okay, it only goes to 75,000 this time, or it goes to 200,000. But you just spent $13. And what is that? A pizza? Not even. So these are things that people can do. You can open up an account on Ameritrade or any of these other E-Trades. There's no charge. There's a charge to make the fund, to buy the fund. I don't know what it is. So you pay that one-time charge to make the trade, and it just sits there as an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's no different than buying any other stock on the stock exchange. They created these electronic trading funds for one purpose, to get people sucked into the stock market. That's why I don't recommend, putting vast amounts in. This is just a speculative idea that if I had implemented this plan 9 years ago, I would have been a multimillionaire today. So if history repeats itself, I shouldn't be that way this time around. I'm just simply using an old idea that would have worked 9 years ago.
And you also mentioned that if you did hit, you do got some money. You do have some money, and you and these things aren't. You want to save your money. You can't bring home $500,000 in cash and stick it in your, because you obviously trip some people when you find out about things. There is a way using U.S. Treasuries and negative interests that are available too. But even in that show, you put together ways that people who don't have a lot of dough can get involved in it through the trading funds under that.
Right, or just putting them in U.S. Treasuries. If you had $500,000, at least in the Great Depression, that would hold it under your name. You would not lose it. You become the banker over the U.S. government when you invest in U.S. Treasuries under your name. It's very important that you don't buy U.S. Treasuries through any other bank or any other credit union or anything like that. Another thing, a lot of people are confused with credit unions and banks. Every single bank and credit union and everything else other than U.S. Treasuries will go down this time. Do not have confidence in any bank or credit union that hands out mortgage loans. Everything will go down. Real estate will get wiped out. That will wipe out even credit unions that do not invest directly with the casinos of the banks. The smaller banks are also being drawn into the bigger banks as well. They're coming up with new laws now that pretty much makes everybody liable. Every bank, every credit union liable for people's money. So there's only two places to put it, really. Physical cash or U.S. Treasuries, and then you can speculate with a little bit in the ETFs on the downside. That's about the only places I would put your money. Not gold and silver, not real estate, and certainly not a bank.
All right, so then this is what I appreciate that you are giving out very simple, very inexpensive in terms of the ETFs, the short-selling ETFs of the markets. There's a simple way to insure yourself in the crash, and there's ways to maintain your money. Like but the Treasuries, if you own it, it's your money. It can't be siphoned off to bail out the banks because technically you're the bank, so to speak. And so these are various ways. And if there's negative interest rates, which you also say are most likely to come, that money in the Treasuries would then exponentially grow. So you not only do you save your money from being confiscated, but there is a growth potential. And this information is so valuable, and it's so simple, and it's anybody. You don't have to be a scholar, or nor do you have to be a millionaire to take advantage of what you've put together. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that you are putting this out for people. By myself alone, just me, I'd be happy to talk with you, let alone the fact that this can be freely shared through these videos to help regular old people, and then they can get through what's coming while their perhaps well-to-do neighbors are ruined. And, not that you'd gloat over it, but I mean the fact that there's an opportunity or some way to get through it.
I guarantee you the bankers out there do not care what will happen to the people out here when this happens, when this crash happens, and there will be no time to get prepared. You have to do the very simple things that I'm suggesting now, and which is really very easy. What effort does it take to pull your money out of the bank, your savings, your long, hard earnings that you've had? You're not earning that much in interest anyway. You could easily slip that right over into U.S. Treasuries and not be directly hit by the next collapse. And I don't have to. Go ahead.
No, I do want to mention that when I did open an account and get these ETF funds, I had a call. I typed in the wrong password or something, and they wanted me to call and verify for security. And I was talking to the guy, and I said, "While you're here," I ran past the guy, what you were talking about. I said, "Why I'm buying these ETF funds?" And he was looking at it, yeah. And he not only did he validate the truth of the mechanism, yes, this will do exactly what you say in the event of the crash. He also confirmed what you said about the Dodd-Franks, that the banks do not have, that they do have a different mechanism to, let's say, creatively put their assets in the positive, and that the FDIC will not have enough money to cover it. Everything you said, this guy verified. And he was telling me, because, yeah, he worked for a bank for a year. I was in the FDIC for years, 10 years in another bank, and when I worked for the bank, and you're absolutely true. Everything that you're saying is absolutely true and will work, and, the only variable is, will there be a crash? It's not what you're saying is completely right on. And the only thing is, can this rocket ride go forever? Because if it crashes, everything you said will work in terms of saving or creating wealth. And he didn't have to say anything like that. It was nothing like he was trying to sell me anything. I mean, it was just kind of a conversation, and he validated it. Not that I didn't believe you, but I just thought that was kind of interesting that he said this.
Yeah, if you could ever find anybody that's still alive after the Great Depression, they would tell you that cash was the only thing that really mattered. There was no cash out. There was no cash in the economy. There was just no way for them to survive, and that's why they had to go to a credit system. But they took that credit system and amped it and bent the meters so far now with their banks that it's turned into one great big speculative casino. And we saw what happened just 9 years ago, and it will happen again. And they know it will happen again, and they're starting to see the signs that it's happening again.
I posted on Facebook. I don't know if I could find it. I just thought of this now. It's a little impromptu, but I saw an article that made me think about our upcoming show, and I think I'll include it in the links below because I'll find it if I can't do it right now. Oh yeah, here we go. It was on Zero Hedge. Boy, the Zero Hedge has been a pretty good place for information. Are the rich panicking? It was the article, and that the rich are starting to hoard cash. There you go. Not they're hoarding cash in the terms of what we're talking about, the paper money. And I'll include that article as well in this. That this isn't some kind of, I don't know how I say it. This is like you're driving a car, and the gas is going to empty, and you got some gas left, right? But you know you're going to run out of gas. So you see a gas station, and you go like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I can make the next one, you know? I mean, this is kind of what we're looking at, and the consequences of stopping, it depends on, you know, where you're at, so to speak. You know, if you're in a desert or if you're in a crime area or what have you. But it's not a question of whether or not the car is going to run out of gas. It's when and where. And if you make preparations for this, like stopping at a certain spot or whatever. I mean, the idea is that it's not whether this will happen, it's when. And your mechanisms here for doing it are very harmless. I mean, you're not talking about, like, doing some dangerous financial risk. You know, I mean, it's almost like it's a no-brainer to do this. Buy a fund for $13. I mean, it's like there's no risk in this, and if we go into a new age of some kind of great financial stuff and it goes up forever, hey, you lost $13. But all the history, all the mechanism, all the mathematics is all against that going on. And for a crash. And it's only emotional that's driving it upward. And when reality hits, reality always wins. And it wins depending how bad your cognitive dissonance is. The reality crash is, could be horrible. You know, so this is why I can't stress this enough. That what you've put together is such a no-brainer.
Yeah, they're not going to lose anything if they take this advice. But if they take the advice of other analysts that are telling them to invest in stocks and gold at prices that are obviously inflated and in a bubble, yes, they might go higher, and you might actually make a little money, but somewhere down the line, this comes to an end. And you want to make sure you're covered because a lot of jobs will be lost in the next Great Depression. And that's exactly what the Federal Reserve Chairman said, that when they plan on not bailing out the banks this next time, it will cause a Great Depression, because that's the only thing that saved it 9 years ago was the taxpayer bailouts and central bank money pouring in to save the banks. So they can't do it this time. They know that. So the only money that's going to be recognized in the future is cash in U.S. Treasuries, and that's it. And if you're caught in any other mechanism you know, it's going to be very difficult. You might have to wait a long, long time to see any money, if any at all.
I just put up on the while you were talking, I put it up on the screen. Are the rich panicking? European elites are hoarding cash, and they have links cited. The Japanese are stuffing safes full of high denominational bills. The Saudis are scrambling. And judging from the flow charts, the richest Americans are getting increasingly concerned about the safety of their wealth. And one of the indications of this is that there is a demand is soaring for armed security and armored car services to be able to transfer cash, so that the wages have soared for these people because the demand is huge, because they can't get enough of it for all the demand and using to move cash around. Very interesting kind of a clue there to lead backing to some of the other stories of the hoarding of cash. But anyway, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to say? Do you have any kind of a wind-up here? Did I miss something?
No, but you did bring out something I better say quickly about it. You mentioned U.S. Treasuries that I referred to in the past as zero-coupon bonds. Those are in U.S. Treasuries as well. Those are very safe, but I don't recommend those until after the crash, where it forces the government to have to adjust their interest rates much lower, in which case these zero-coupon bonds one can invest in, and they can easily make 10 times, maybe even 100 times their money in that. It's a real good idea. But if we do see a crash, then I highly recommend those because that in itself will be a very, very safe place to put your money. Not only is it not connected to the casino, but it will work much like the other ETFs.
Okay, so this is. And you cover this in the U.S. Treasury, the one yields in negative interest rates video we did. That's when you would take advantage of it when the interest rates start to go south. That's when they would start to yield increases.
Right. And in every recession, they have to drop interest rates at least about 5% to reset the economy. Well, we're already so low that the only way you can get 5% is lower is to go into negative interest rates. And that's if a recession hit. I'm talking about a depression. They may have to go at least negative 15%. That means if you put any money in the bank if you had any money left that they haven't stolen already, they would take another 15% right off the top just to hold it. But these zero coupon bonds would ignite upwards, and you'd make a lot of money on it.
And people might be thinking, like, why on earth would anybody put money in the bank that has negative interest? But I think the selling point would be for safety purposes. You're paying them a piece of your money to make sure that you have the money, as opposed to putting it in and having it siphoned away.
Yeah, these are banks that have already been, they probably would start right back up fresh, not necessarily, these would be recreated after a crash. So it's, they have to have some kind of banks come back up. They can't just keep them down all the time.
Yeah, so I'm saying their marketing, which would make sense, was, hey, you just lost your money in that bank, but our bank, we guarantee, it's safety, and they'll charge for that security purpose. It's like hiring a security guard or something like that. You're going to have to pay them.
And that's another thing I should mention on this program. When this crash hits, all these mechanisms to leverage will go again out the door. They'll be banned. They'll disappear, and they'll never be used again in our lifetime. Just like they were banned in 1933, because the vast majority of the people would be wiped out. And that's why we're doing this program, is to try and save as many people right now, so they don't have to go through what 6 million did during the Great Depression and starve to death. That's ultimately the reason why we're doing this program.
There's one other thing that comes up now, and not to throw another leg into the show, but I think it can't go unanswered. All right, so people took advantage of the ATF funds, and they short-selling funds, I call them, where they made money on the crash. Well, the banks are toxic. What do they do with that money? They're going to sell their fund to recoup their profit, because eventually the risk of the fund going bankrupt or something is there at the end. I mean, I saw that in the movie The Big Short, by the way. I really recommend people see that movie. It's a movie, and it's entertaining and all, but it also has a lot of information on there that if you can take that, which was isolated to the real estate market, right? And if you could just say that's the whole world and that's all our money system, you just kind of make that flip. It shows in a nutshell what's happening, and people bet against the real estate market, and they made an astronomical amount of money. But if you kept it too long, the funds would bankrupt. So the guy was recommending that you take your profit now while going's good. So at some point you're selling this fund. Where do you put the money that it doesn't get sucked up into these toxic banks?
Well, yeah, when you do reverse your position on it, let's say you sell out your shares on the brokerage firm that you go through, whether it's E-Trade, Ameritrade, or there's probably two others out there that are well known that I can't mention right now because I can't remember. But anyway, when your account automatically falls into a money market account that is not allegedly not involved with anything. My only concern is that whether the brokerage goes under or not. That's my problem. But I have no problems transferring that money over to a futures and options brokerage, which is supposed to hold it in a neutral account under your name. And hopefully these brokerages that you do short with ETFs do the same thing, that they hold all your money under your name and not theirs, so that they don't go under as well. But ultimately, yeah, I would go directly from the ETF to U.S. Treasuries.
Okay, that's what I was going to get at. It seems like even though all it is should work, you're doing things like, well, hopefully they do this, and hopefully they won't do that, and I don't like to be hopeful. So ultimately, I was going to say probably the best thing would be to go into the Treasuries where it will be safe in that structure. And I think you mentioned in another show that I said, well, what if the Treasuries go under? And he says, well, in that case, we're back in caves we're cooking our meat that we hunted on open fires, because that's how bad it would have to. If it goes that bad, then there's there's nothing you can do about it.
That's the reason why you're seeing the rich pour as much money as they can into cash and getting it under there. They're seeing the same potential of losing their digital money possibilities. It would not surprise me to see in this crash that the whole market locks up and nobody sees anything for several months. But when the exchanges do open up, the short sellers will be incredibly rich, and those on the long side will be completely obliterated. When their accounts will be, their 401ks will be zero OKs, because that's what they'll be worth.
And I'll throw another 2 cents in here about the ETFs. Say if you buy 10 shares of the one, and it starts, things start to go south, and all of a sudden one, they're worth 10,000, for example. They have a potential of a lot higher, but you could start selling. You can peel one off and take 10,000. So now and if you can get that in cash somehow, see, now you can start pulling things out along the way. If you buy one, you're kind of sticking all the way to the end. But if you buy a few of them, you can toss a few in along the way to help yourself out. So that's the only thing I would throw on there. But I think that's pretty much covers it. The other videos are mentioned. I have on the webpage that go into what we've covered, I guess, in more of a detail, because like the whole presentation is about one of the topics. And this one, I thought was good to go into why, because a lot of people say things. And you can just believe him or not, and I don't like to believe anything. You know, I'd like to see something. Give me something tangible here, which you have done very well in explaining, both historically and in the mechanized. Plus, we've also put out evidence that it is happening, and other people are saying these things, and other people, like in the recent article, the rich are pulling out cash, and that's the reason they're doing it. Although they're not converting it into gold, let's say. Some may, but the point is that the cash will be. Can you imagine going into Walmart with a gold coin, or even worse, bullion, and trying to exchange something? And now, one thing I also want to add: people have said, "Yeah, but I can get cash from my gold broker, like a guy who sells gold coins." Now think about again, supply and demand. So now you can't go into Walmart and buy things with your gold, so you go to the gold broker, and he's going to give you cash for your gold. Now, cash again is at a premium. It's rare. So, of course, the price of your gold is going to go down because he's going to be giving you the cash, which is a rare commodity at this point. So when you do go to sell your gold, it is going to be dramatically lower because of simple supply and demand of the cash needed to go out and buy something. So unless you're going to go directly with somebody and give gold for services directly, and that person also knows they kind of have, I mean, they need to sell it, you need to buy it, you guys can negotiate. But if you're going to go to a third party to try and get cash for gold, they're going to take advantage of you. You know, so I mean, even that's a simple kind of a way to show that simply gold in this short term is going to have problems.
Yeah, when liquidity is dried up, you'd be surprised how fast prices drop on everything. And that's why they've had to encourage corporations to borrow more money each year to buy back their own stocks. That's why central banks have had to infuse more money, even though they claim to be pulling money out of the market. They're really not. They're just lying. They do have a date in which they know when they're going to pull that plug, and it will be something that I think will happen very quickly. And this bubble in all these markets will come down hard and fast.
All right. Well, I think we covered it, and we will let this go. I have all the links for everything, and at some point maybe we'll revisit some of these things in the future. If things start to hit the fan, so I might want to have you back on to, you know, run commentary as it goes on, provided I could even broadcast. So. I appreciate you sharing this information, you know, on your own time, freely, just for the sake of helping people. That is kind of rare in the world of finance in and of itself. So once again, I want to throw that out there.
Yeah, thanks again. I actually enjoyed doing this type of program, and yeah, let's hope that everything turns out better for people by taking this type of advice.
And again, these links, especially the ETF short selling funds, because everybody can do that. I mean, the amount that you have to invest in it is literally tens of dollars, and the returns could save your whole family. It's like there's like no brains behind doing this whatsoever. And all the links are there, with all the information to go look at it. I've done this. And I am so thankful for the opportunity. And so we'll take care, Lionel, and we'll talk. And if something else comes up that we need to share, we need to hear, well, you know, I will be here to put another leg on this journey. So take care, and I appreciate it. People can email Lionel through our website, Lionel@innersights.com, and it'll get to him, and then he can determine how and if he answers. The entire catalog of his staying here is on his own channel, within our playlist within our channel. You go to the links right on our website, feettothefireradio.com. Will take you to our YouTube channel, and you simply scroll down. You'll see the playlist with Lionel, and you can do it that way, or we have the direct links below. And his main website, holyvirus.com, which is not related to finance. This is what his book that he put out in the research and the history to the Babylonian influence in Christianity, which is a fascinating very enlightening topic, is also links are also there. Actually, probably a lot of the financing laws you mentioned have gone back to the Babylonians. So, I mean, this is really like all kind of tied around in a big circle, going back to the ancient days.
It really is. It really is. It's the origin of the United States and Europe is pretty much the Babylonian Roman laws. It's an amalgamation of both.
So that's there also for people to see. So once again, I thank you, Lionel, and we will keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome, dear friends. Welcome to Dog Poet Transmitting. Greetings from your friends and unseen helpmates from the Arcturian Brotherhood and the Sirius Cluster. As we have probably stated here often enough, that it will not be a trial for you to remember, we're an observer of trends. We believe if you can really see trends, that it will have a positive impact on your security, quality of life, and your well-being. The biggest trend I'm noticing at the moment is the proactive and relentless behavior of Mr. Apocalypse. Ironically, he told me he would be doing exactly what he is doing several years ago when I was in Italy. He said, visible, I'm going to appear right in the middle of them and catch them with their pants down and reveal it to the world in living color and with all available humor and condemnation. Witness the evolution of the Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, loop-de-loop, and the wailing hysteria, actually, that followed. Of course, cynical opportunists are attempting to use this trend of sexual revelation among predominantly tribe members, in fact, almost exclusively, possibly with the exception of Kevin Spacey. Oh, I don't know what Louis C.K. is, but almost all of them are tribe members, as should be the case, as is generally the case, as is usually the case, but I protest too much. Anyway, cynical opportunists are attempting to hijack this trend to their advantage as they seek to destroy Judge Roy Moore. He is in Alabama and wanting to replace Senator Jeff Sessions, who, as you know, was appointed Attorney General and is then no longer Senator. Moore won the runoff primary, and apparently he's got a lot more support than the Democratic challenger. The problem with Judge Roy Moore, and he also beat out Trump's man for this position, the problem with him is that he's a fundamentalist, very conservative Christian. In fact, I refer to him as 10 Commandments Roy Moore, and you can find out more about that particular feature just by looking it up or putting that very term into a search engine, and you'll learn about Judge Roy Moore. Now, as you're probably well aware, there's a war against Christmas and all things Christian. And this is being fomented by Israel, the Zionist Satan cabal here in the United States and around the world. They're trying to erase Christianity and the influence of Christianity from the planet to be replaced with worship of Satan, Baal, Mammon, whoever their flavor of the day is, or whoever they think will do you the most damage if you convert. So suddenly accusations about Judge Roy Moore are surfacing. Some woman claims that 40 years ago, when she was 14, he touched her inappropriately and put her hand on him in a particular location. I don't know where that would be, but it's some particular location. And, well, what do you know? It's just a few days before this election that's going to be held tomorrow. And out of nowhere come all these hypocritical sycophants, like the illustrious John McCain, who's probably one of the most corrupt people ever come down the pike and occupy elected office, along with Orrin Hatch, and God knows what he's up to, and a bunch of the rest of these sold-out individuals, all of whom are owned by Israel. 12 different Republicans whom we can trace their relationship with the Zionist cause and Israel firsters, all simultaneously coming out and screaming that this man should be removed. They don't need proof. It's not the same in the political arena as it is in the entertainment world or somewhere else. You don't need proof. Apparently, this is what Romney said. Mitt Romney, another leading light there in the moral firmament. Anyway, they don't want Christians anywhere near the sausage-making machinery. That's where they make the law. And Roy Moore, like Jeff Sessions, and a number of other people who have come into the states of prominence now, are all of the Christian persuasion. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're true followers of Christ. I don't know these people personally. But this, that they're Christians at all, is a problem for the people who are not Christians and want to destroy Christianity and Christmas and have any mention of these things wiped out of the consciousness of the human race, which they're doing a pretty good job of anyway on their own with their slavish devotion to appetite. And as I said, you know that almost all of them, well, the lion's share of the abusers, are tribe members. They routinely hate all forms of morality, any mention of God, and are relentless promoters of every bent sexual persuasion out there. They are money and PR, the money and PR, behind all of this. And they take their marching orders from Satan's regents here on earth. People like the Rothschild family, George Soros, and others, and like the royal families of Northern Europe. And of course, whoever the current heads of depravity are in international finance, in the entertainment realm, politics, and religion, of course. Sex is one of the major problems of our times, but with Mr. Apocalypse on the set, we're getting cleared up on one of this. Sigmund Freud is being exposed as a perverted, nasty, evil, ugly fraud. Kinsey, same thing, has come out about him. Some of his incredibly disgusting behavior. I'm not here to judge these people. I'm merely pointing this out. I'm saying that a lot of our moral structures are challenged by people who possess no morality at all. And the morality is a good thing. It really is. Because without it, civilization breaks down. People can't raise their families. There's no law and order. I mean, let's face it, I do things that are probably questionable and will continue to do them for the duration simply because I know the laws made against certain behavior are wrong, okay? In those cases, I follow my own best instincts. Otherwise, I'm extremely law-abiding. I follow every single rule on the highway. I obey every law that has to do with don't steal, don't murder, don't commit adultery. Well, these days anyway. I don't know. I'm not trying to paint myself as something extremely upright. I'm trying to be, okay? I don't know how close I've come to that. Mr. Apocalypse is all about revealing and uncovering. So you can expect some really surprising exposures to come about shortly. And they're going to show up in your event horizon windshield. I know the world looks bent and perverted and seemingly outrageously unfair wherever you look. Many of us prefer to shield our eyes. That's how bad it appears to be. Of course, we're not seeing the big picture, and with very few exceptions. So we operate in what I call snapshot mode. And with this feature working, it'd be very discouraging. In the end, you and your existence and everything about it comes down to who resides within you. Who are you hosting? Who are you allowing to be resident in your being? Seriously. Regardless of my shortcomings and all the many mistakes I make, whatever limitations there may be, I seek daily to be aligned with the everlasting Almighty. And I'm not shy about saying so. And I've always been this way through my entire life, regardless of how out of control I may have appeared at certain times, and whether or not I actually was out of control or not. This was actually what my objective was all along. I have no exclusive connection to any particular faith or system of belief or, religion or anything like that. I just love the ineffable and wish to increase that in every moment in which I exist, here or anywhere that I may be. I may not be as formed as some or wise as others. I'm certainly not as disciplined or focused as some, but I do know that a directed and applied love of the Almighty covers a multitude of ills. You follow what I'm saying? This is why it is the chief and greatest commandment. Thou shalt love the Lord God Almighty with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind. There's a reason for this. And we become what we emulate. Emulation is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. We need to remember this. We become like that which we love. And that is the whole point of that commandment in the first place. And it also puts us in line to receive inspiration and intuitive truth through certain vehicles, conduits that come to us in the spiritual realm. Otherwise, you're getting information from other locations. And that information may not be useful or even safe a lot of the time. All right, my friends, it's time to go. Come to the end of the broadcast, and you will see me next week if there is one. In the meantime, I would suggest putting all of your eggs in one basket when it comes to your spiritual life, to your fortunes and fates. Let the ineffable sort it out. Personally, I'm left with no other option, and do not expect one to appear either. That said, hail Lord Jesus Christ. Hare Krishna. Mishamandu Guru Bawa. Allah Akbar. Much love, Lady Nature. Greetings, my good friend, Lord Ganesh. Om Amitabha. Carry on, Baha'u'llah, Aloha, and be well, my friends.